Good morning, Wabash. Today speaking at Pioneer Chapel is Matt Tanney with his talk entitled Family, Football, and Force Majeure. Matt Tanney, class of 2005, returned to Wabash in 2018 as Director of Athletics and Campus Wellness. An English major and member of the basketball and football teams, he earned his law degree at Indiana Robert H. McKinney School of Law, then worked in Division I athletics at the University of Ohio State, University of Dayton, and the University of Oklahoma. Prior to returning to Wabash, he served as Director of Athletics at Western Illinois University, and at the time of his appointment was the youngest Division I athletic director in the country. In addition to his role as AD, Mr. Tanney teaches courses on sports and the law, including a freshman tutorial this fall. When he's not in the Allen Center or cheering on the Little Giants, he's spending time with his wife, Julia, and twin daughters, Lillian and Caitlin. Please join me in welcoming Matt Tanney.
Good morning, Wabash. Thank you to the Sphinx Club for the invitation to speak today. I greatly appreciate it. I also want to take a moment at the outset this morning and recognize the coaches and staff in athletics. And at a department that is invested in competition and student success, we've significantly adjusted the last several months, and everyone has truly been tremendous in rising to the occasion. You've probably seen a coach or a staff member operating as a case manager or a lab assistant or a testing coordinator, among many other roles. But it's truly been a significant team effort, and I want to thank them today. Finally, thank you to our students, and in particular, our scholar athletes. Because of you, I have the best AD job in the country, period. Your competitive and academic excellence is a real joy to be a part of. Exactly 19 years ago tomorrow, on September 11th, 2001, I stood in the Great Hall of the Sparks Center as a freshman on this campus and watched the Twin Towers collapse. I recall walking into the building for breakfast. It was right after an 8 a.m. English class. And I found everyone fixated on the large TV in the corner of the room. It was one of those remember where you were when moments. Now, the following days on campus, there was a lot of emotion, shock, sadness, even some anger. And shortly thereafter, everyone knew we were simply living in a different world. The last several months have evoked some of the same emotions. I'm sure everyone can recall with great clarity that moment in March when everything came to a sudden halt, calendars emptied, and plans were canceled. In the law, there's a term for significant life-altering events that we don't see coming. It's called force majeure. Black's Law Dictionary defines force majeure as an event or effect that can be neither anticipated nor controlled. The term includes both acts of nature, such as floods and hurricanes, and acts of people, such as riots, strikes, and wars. Force majeure clauses are found in contracts and offer an out for parties when performance of an agreement is impossible due to an unforeseen event. Now, outside of law school and until about 6 months ago, force majeure clauses were boilerplate language that rarely came up in any conversation. But recently, the meaning and the inclusion or the exclusion of those clauses has generated a lot of debate, particularly as businesses and sports have restarted in the pandemic. So, how do we move through and beyond the force majeure periods in our lives? In such challenging moments, I find myself leaning into many lessons learned through a life in sport. My life has been indelibly shaped by involvement in sport in one way or another. First, as the son of a coach, then as an athlete, and now as an athletics director. Today, I'll share 3 transferable lessons learned through some of those experiences in sport that might help us navigate some difficult moments. First, though, I want to give a little bit more background on my family. I grew up in central Illinois and arrived at Wabash from a rural community, Lexington, which is located about 10 miles north of Bloomington Normal. I'm the oldest of 3, with 2 younger brothers, Mitch and Alex. Mitch actually attended Wabash and later worked in the front offices for the Chicago Bears and the Denver Broncos. He was part of the Broncos organization that won Super Bowl 50 back in 2016. Alex is a 9-year NFL veteran quarterback. And my father coached high school football in Illinois for 25 plus years, including all 3 of his sons, and he's part of the Illinois High School Coaches Association Hall of Fame. So, suffice it to say that growing up, my experiences in sport and family are interwoven, and in particular, with the sport of football. One maxim in particular that I learned at countless football practices and games, watching my father on the sidelines, was the phrase, "Get back in the huddle." Now, in some cases, in many cases really, it was very literal. It meant, following the conclusion of a play, all 11 players needed to huddle up for the next play call. It was often articulated with, let's call it, great exuberance. But it also became a mantra after a really positive play or a really negative play. For example, if the running back scampered for 25 yards, get back in the huddle. If the quarterback was sacked for 10 yards, get back in the huddle. Ultimately, the outcome of the play didn't really matter. Over time, the phrase became shorthand for, that's over now, it's time to move on to the next one. I'm sure that lately we've probably had more than a few days when we feel like we're the quarterback that's been sacked for 10 yards, we're face down in the dirt with a 250-pound linebacker lying on top of us. I'm sure everybody can relate to that feeling in recent months. But during those days and those moments, I can still visualize my father on the sideline, whistle around his neck, saying, "Get back in the huddle." And here's the beauty and the nuance to that statement. By getting back in the huddle, you're staying in the game. So I encourage you, during those challenging moments or those temporary setbacks, keep moving forward and get back in the huddle. Because regardless of the outcome of any one situation, positive or negative, it's most important that we stay in the game, stay engaged, stay involved, and be ready for the next moment. Now, having your father as your head coach offered some really unique lessons, not to mention some really interesting dinner time conversations. But one moment in particular as an athlete stands out. It was a high school football game. I was playing defense. I intercepted a pass and returned it probably 25 yards into the end zone for a touchdown. In my excitement, I may have taken an extra pause in the end zone to celebrate the moment. Nothing excessive. Let's just call it a long pause, okay? I jogged over to the sideline. I expected a hearty congratulations from my coach, also my father. Instead, I got a piece of life advice. Act like you've been there before. Now, here's the reality. I was not exactly a touchdown scoring machine, gentlemen, so it's actually very likely I hadn't been there before. But that was beside the point. The point was win gracefully and with humility. It's an important balancing point that still resonates today. All of our Little Giant teams want to compete and win, but we're operating and living presently in an environment full of ambiguity. It feels like the scoreboard's been unplugged, and some days it's impossible to tell whether we're up by 10 or down by 20. So I go back to act like you've been there before. And the reality is that none of us have been here in the middle of a pandemic. But similar to get back in the huddle, the phrase act like you've been there before was shorthand for handling the moment with humility and respecting the opponent. The information on COVID changes regularly, and the guidance tends to shift course, but the best way to navigate the ebbs and the flows is to gracefully adapt and know that eventually, the scoreboard will turn back on and we'll be ahead by 3 touchdowns. I have great confidence that's going to happen on campus. The third, final concept is one that was cultivated as a student here and then as an alumnus, but it's especially powerful now as the athletic director and a member of this community. And quite simply, it's gratitude. It's impossible to articulate the countless moments and people that foster gratitude at this great college. But I'll give 2 examples, one professional and one personal. The first is that unbelievable new stadium located about 100 yards away. Little Giant Stadium is an incredible testament to the donors, alumni, and many friends of the college, and a statement to all of you, our students, on how highly we value your experience here. And I cannot tell you how truly excited I am and how much I look forward to hosting the first home football game, the first home track meet, and any other number of campus events in that facility for the first time. At most places, construction of a project of this scope and scale during a pandemic just does not have a high probability of success. But not at Wabash. The commitment and the collaboration to complete this project is just one of many reasons for my gratitude as the athletics director. Now, personally, I could share just as many moments. But in 2012, my family experienced its own force majeure moment when my wife, Julia, was diagnosed with an aggressive form of multiple sclerosis, which is an autoimmune disease. In her case, control of her legs and lower extremities are a real challenge. And at age 33, it relegated her to a wheelchair for most activities and forever changed our family's life. Yet, despite the many limitations imposed by MS, I have to admit to all of you, it has cultivated an abundance of gratitude in our lives. My wife and I have learned that together, despite the limitations of a really nasty, progressive disease, there is always more good than bad. If you ask anyone that's lived through a significant, life-altering event, a car accident, a cancer diagnosis, it often creates a greater appreciation for the many good people and the many good things in your life. And so for that reason, my family is incredibly grateful to be a part of this family, the Wabash College family, in the midst of a pandemic, in a community that demonstrates daily its care for the welfare of others. And I share this with Julia's permission. But if you are uncertain what an underlying health condition means in the context of COVID, you can look no further than her. For my wife and countless others that you may or may not know, a COVID infection could be very dangerous. So on her behalf, gentlemen, and on my behalf, thank you for all you're doing on campus. So in closing, I'll leave you with this, and I hope that any one of these examples might help you push through your own force majeure event of any size or scale. Remember to get back in the huddle, whether it's a good day or a bad day. Consistency and effort keeps us on track, and it keeps us in the game, and it helps propel us forward. Number 2, act like you've been there, recognizing that we've in fact never encountered such a moment in our lives. Embracing it with humility and respect for others is paramount to success. And arguably, and I would say most importantly, practice gratitude. We're all living through a historic moment at the college, and gratitude for the collective efforts of this campus should be recognized daily. And so, to borrow the slogan from our campus care team, I'd offer that this, gentlemen, is how we fight. Thank you very much.